Hello, this is manic.mercurian with your birth chart reading. This reading will be for Sunday, December 27th, 1998 at 4:07 p.m. in Springfield, Massachusetts. And before I begin this reading, I did want to say that I appreciate your patience with this. I know it took me a while to get this out. I'm just getting over a cold, so I apologize in advance if my voice cracks at all. But yeah, so I just pulled up your chart and I can already see some interesting stuff going on. I will definitely make especially sure to cover romance, money, and career. I usually cover those things anyway, but I'll pay special attention to those later on in the reading. But first, just some general information. So you have Capricorn Sun, Aries Moon with Cancer rising. One major pattern that I noticed you can already see just by looking at your big three, so to speak. So Sun and Capricorn, Moon and Aries, Cancer rising. All three of these placements are in cardinal signs. So in other words, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer are all signs that correspond to the beginnings of seasons. So this means that you have a lot of themes in your chart having to do with initiation, individuality, blazing your own path, so to speak, your own trail, leading, being a leader in some kind of way, even if it's just leading by example. We're going to talk more about that later on in the reading as well, but that's a huge theme right off the bat. And we'll talk later as well about your Mars, which is in Libra. So these are all four of the cardinal signs. All of these signs initiate or lead in different ways. And so by having major placements in really all four of the cardinal signs, you have these different kind of pillars of what it takes to be a leader. So you have, for instance, Sun and Venus in Capricorn. Capricorn leads physically. It leads by example. Capricorn Sun people are known to be very independent and individualistic. They lead in a very direct way. Having Aries Moon and Aries Saturn, these also indicate you lead in a very direct way. But this is a little bit different because this adds a lot of impulsive energy, fiery energy, leading in the moment, leading through action, okay? And then you have the Cancer rising, which is a little bit different. That's leading through emotion, so leading through sensitive ways, more subtle ways, leading indirectly, leading through emotional, like technically you would call it manipulation. It doesn't have to be bad necessarily. It's not it doesn't always have to be, what's the word, like evil or controlling or anything like that, but you can initiate through emotion or through persuading people, if that makes sense. And then Mars in Libra is a little bit similar as well. It's leading indirectly, leading through other people, leading through thought or through your voice, through information, things like that. So anyway, I find it very interesting that that's a huge theme for you, leading, initiating, and that may partially come as a surprise because there are some placements in your chart that show that you may not always feel like a leader. You may feel more kind of outcasted, and although you can be very passionate and very maybe even stubborn at times, your chart shows that you don't like confrontation. So you don't want to rub people the wrong way. You don't want to make waves too much. And yet at the same time, there's so much of your astrology that has to do with you influencing people, you changing things. You are bringing something new into this world. So I think that's one of your major challenges. And we're going to talk more about challenges a little bit later too. But yeah, already the way your chart is set up, it does look like a difficult task, but one that can be very promising. One, there's lots of potential here. It can be very rewarding. This task having to do with you bringing something new in to this world. You're going to do this in your own way. You're going to do this in a way that is not like directly controlling people. Like, again, I can see in your chart you don't want to push people, to do things they don't want to do. You definitely want to like you don't want to go against the grain, but at the same time you have to balance that with asserting something of your own design, I guess. Anyway, that's just one major thing. That's probably the biggest theme that popped out at me right as soon as I saw your chart. But we'll kind of, I'm sure that'll come up again later in the reading. But other things that I noticed is that it looks like part of this whole, being an individual and leading your own path, it looks like a lot of it is mental and philosophical. It looks like you'd be interested in some very unusual information. Part of that could definitely be astrology. And I always like to cite the placements I'm, getting this information from. So the placements that make me say that are your Mercury, which is in 6th house Sagittarius. That's a huge one for, having your own thoughts. Whenever you have 6th house placements, you tend to be kind of an individual and think for yourself. And Mercury in Sagittarius is in detriment. So detriment placements also have us think for ourselves and kind of lead our own path. So, because Mercury has to do with the mind and information, this means that you would like higher information. You want to know the truth. You may be a truth seeker. You want to know the deepest information. You want to get right into the nitty gritty, as they say. You want to know how things work, how the world works. Part of this too also has to do with your Jupiter, which is in 9th house Pisces. This is a very strong, very prominent Jupiter placement. Jupiter has to do with our understanding of the world, the cosmos, philosophy, things like that. For you, it's in domicile in Pisces, so that means that it's very strong right off the bat. This isn't something you necessarily have to develop in your life. It's already very strong. It will always be strong for you. And basically I'm just referring to this, again, this like curiosity. You want to know, you want to really analyze things, and you want to, you naturally want to think, you want to think big picture. You want to know how things work holistically, what the big picture looks like. What does the world look like? What does, outer space look like, so to speak? So, so I think that's definitely part of this whole, you being a leader, you being an individual. A lot of it has to do with your understanding of the universe, basically. And I would speculate that you'd probably get into some very deep and controversial topics, like, astrology would be a good example. Or it could be occult information, quote unquote conspiracy theories, or politics. I'm just listing off some possible things. It could be other things too. I don't know. But, deep things like that, deep, information that might be triggering to some people. Information that a lot of people would turn away from because it seems too heavy, too intense, too dense. Most people don't have the curiosity that it takes to tackle such deep subjects that you do. But also, you have Sun in Capricorn too, so you're willing to put in the time. Capricorn people are very thorough. They're all about the end game. They're willing to put time into things too. So the combination of multiple of these placements makes me think that, you like to get in really deep into information. Oh, going off that too, just riffing off that for a second. You have South Node in Aquarius. I like to talk a lot more about the nodes in the, past life and childhood part of the reading. But just mentioning that really quick too, South Node in Aquarius is sort of like the prodigy placement. This means that, you were a smart kid. You were a kid that naturally kind of understood things maybe ahead of your peers, especially academically, informationally, things like that. So I think that is also part, it fits so well with other placements in your chart, which all indicate that you are an individual thinker. You always have been, and you want to know, the real questions, the big questions, for sure. Okay, what else can we talk about? I feel like I haven't talked a lot about your Aries moon. So that one's interesting too, and it is very prominent in your chart as well. It's way up in the 10th house. I should leave I should say that, I use equal houses in case you are wondering. But okay, so moon in 10th house Aries. Moon in Aries is intense. I don't know if you know about that placement, but moon is our emotions, it's our core personality, who we are kind of deep down, so to speak. And because your moon is in Aries, this means that you are maybe a little bit impulsive. You are very fiery, very intense. Aries moon people are known for their charisma. They come across very youthful, childlike, very relatable. They're very easy to get to know because whatever you have in Aries, Aries is a sign that is all about pioneering and like venturing out and starting new things. So because you have moon in Aries, it's like your emotions are very much on the surface, which is a little bit unusual for a Capricorn sun person. These two placements in your chart are, in some ways they're similar, but in a lot of ways they're very contradicting. So on the one hand, you can be you're very thorough, very practical. You think about the long term, the long run. But on the other hand, Moon in Aries shows that you can be impulsive. You can be, fiery, and you can feel so strongly in the moment that you follow that feeling almost blindly. This is reinforced by your Cancer rising as well. Cancer rising means that Moon is your chart ruler. Moon is in Aries, so so it's really interesting. On the one hand, you're a deep thinker, very intellectual, very philosophical, but on the other hand, you're emotional too. You feel so deeply and so strongly that this can be very challenging, because it can make a person reckless. There's no how do I put it? Like, emotions can be, I think they can be very useful. There's a lot of intelligence in emotion, but just like thoughts can be right or wrong, they fail us at times. So can emotions. I think it's sort of like a different sense. What am I trying to say here? Basically, you have a lot of placements that show you're a very deep thinker. You have a lot of placements that show you're a very deep feeler as well. The emotional part will be very difficult, I think, especially early in life. It'll be difficult to know how to control those feelings, just because when they get so intense, it's hard to be conscious, sort of. It's hard to be in control. And it's hard not to be, impulsive and just do something that could be reckless, do something that you may not intend to do based on a feeling that you had in the moment. Excuse me. On the other hand, I think once you are aware of this, and I think you will be, you probably already are aware of these things, because you have this intellectual mind too. When you like both kind of feed on each other. If you have this really strong mind and the strong emotion, strong mental energy and strong emotional energy, I think they can kind of balance each other. It's all about balance. Both have pros and cons, but when you develop each of those and then kind of use them together, I think that's something really powerful that you specifically have more than other people. Most of us tend to lean toward just the mental energy or just the emotional energy, and again, there's different pros and cons to each of those. But you have the task, the burden, but also the opportunity to dive really deep into both of those, the mental and the emotional. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, the mental energy, I think, will be easier for you early in life. The emotional energy will be more difficult because, again, it's just so intense. It's hard to know how to control that. But yeah, Moon in Aries, very charismatic placement. This is what people see you as, I guess. This is something interesting too. So some of your placements show that you are this kind of outcast kind of person. You're misunderstood. You think for yourself. You're kind of on the fringes, so to speak. Other people may not really understand you, but you have other placements which show that you can also be very charismatic, and especially at work or in public, people really sense your energy. They relate to you very easily. So that may seem contradictory, but whenever I see contradictory things like that in the chart, I kind of just put it out there because both can be true in different contexts. Like, again, specifically in your work and in public, I think others will understand you more, and you come across as a leader. Saturn in 10th house and Jupiter in 9th house at the top of your chart as well. These mean that you come across as a leader. You also come across as charismatic, relatable. optimistic. You have this balance of coming across optimistic, easygoing, um, upbeat, but also authoritative and like structured. I don't want to say strict necessarily, but like a leader, like composed kind of. Okay, and we'll talk more about that in the career part of your reading. But let's see here, what else? I feel like I've covered so much, and yet at the same time, I've barely kind of opened your chart up here. Okay, anything else before we get into the next part of the reading? Okay, that was kind of fast and a little bit unorganized, but those are the main things I see with your chart, just looking at it at first glance. Definitely an individual. You probably have some very like interesting mannerisms, or maybe even kind of an interesting appearance. Like you're definitely an individual for sure. Capricorn and Aries are probably the signs that most have to do with individuality, and that's where a lot of your placements are. That's where your sun and moon are. What else can we talk about? Okay, let's get into past life themes, childhood upbringing, and then major challenges in this life as well. I feel like we've kind of flirted with each of these themes or subjects already, but let's get into it here. So for the past life, I personally, as an astrologer, don't delve super deep into past life astrology. I mostly just look at the south node. So for you, the south node is at 23 degrees Aquarius in the 8th house. So this suggests a person, in your past life, or maybe multiple lives, you dealt with themes having to do with being something like a scientist, an inventor, a doctor, someone who helped humanity indirectly. So you may have been alone a lot, or you may have been working with other experts, inventing something, designing something, maybe writing like a book, piece of literature, or doing something else to help people, to improve things, but not by working directly with them. Does that make sense? So with Aquarius, it is about helping people, but there's this level of detachment. And that's actually, it may seem contradictory, but it's actually part of it. To be a really effective doctor or engineer or what have you, you have to be detached to make, very intense decisions or very holistic decisions. You have to, you have to weigh a lot of information, a lot of variables. You have to keep the whole picture into account, so to speak. So that's kind of the energy that you dealt with a lot in your past lives, and that you even kind of mastered to a degree. Usually it's focused on helping people or improving things in general, but it's isolating. You may have been an outcast. You may have been an outcast for your beliefs or for information. So, like a great example is like Galileo. I don't know if there's literally an Aquarian theme there with him. I haven't looked at it, but maybe having some kind of revolutionary beliefs or discovery, but one that alienates you because other people don't understand. You may have been ahead of your time. So, coming into this life, you bring that into this life, and we see this a lot in children. So, as a child, you may have been very intelligent, especially academically, with information, and with people as well. You may have been a people watcher, very observant, but with this energy, it is very detached as well. So other people may have not understood you. You may have been an outcast, again, misunderstood. But like I said earlier, this is the prodigy placement. So you may have been, like a child genius almost, especially because Uranus is close to the south node. I wouldn't say it's conjunct, but it's close. So this means this just strengthens these themes that have already, been laid out here, that you were an eccentric kid, you were weird, you were intelligent, you were, creative in a very original kind of way, very unique way. Excuse me. Let's see what else. And then that kind of leads into the childhood and the upbringing. So you have, where's your IC? So your IC is in Virgo. This is also a very academic as well. This shows that you may have been a very curious kid. You wanted to learn. A lot of kids with Virgo IC read a lot because they are, they're curious, they're studious. The combination of that with your South Node in Aquarius, really strengthens the idea that you're a very, very smart kid. All you were interested in was learning, and you're very detached. So you may have not really acted like a kid. You weren't. I don't know. Like most kids are, emotional and they're out of control. They're wild. But based on your IC in Virgo and your South Node in Aquarius, both of these suggest that you would be a very composed child, very mature. Your emotions were actually very much in check. Excuse me. If anything, I think a little bit later in life, your emotions would become a little bit more intense and difficult to control. But yeah, as a kid, it looks like a very, very smart kid, very organized, practical kid for sure. Um, it does look like you may have grown up in an environment that was very, I don't want to say tumultuous, but conflicted. You may have had parents that were very different from one another or had different parenting styles, or, you may have had one parent that just had a lot of contrast within themselves. Maybe different things were expected of you at different times. I'm saying all this because the sun and the moon are in signs that square one another. Sun typically represents the father, moon represents the mother. They're in very different places in the zodiac for you. So this is confusing. This is the most difficult, the more difficult path for a child. But it can be advantageous because it allows you to hold two different ideas in your head at the same time, two different conflicting ideas. You can use this to empathize with people who are experiencing something you never have, or this also comes in handy with understanding very complex concepts. So again, this is more difficult, but it can be very advantageous as well. And I think it really fits again with the whole, some of the major themes of your chart again, because your chart just looks like you'd be focused on understanding very complex concepts and maybe empathizing with people. Maybe that's part of being a leader. So sorry for this poor audio, but I want to get this reading to you in time, and I think you'll appreciate this reading. I think the information will be good. Okay, anyway, let's I think I mostly covered your childhood as far as I can see. Oh, a little bit more about that. Your sun is in the 7th house. So typically when one is born, right around sunset, like you were, this indicates that your parents, particularly your father, but your parents in general may not have understood you. They may not fully understand you. What they may have expected from you, you're something different than what they expected, I guess. So they may never fully understand you. But what's interesting is you have moon in the 10th house. So it's hard to say for sure. This may not be accurate, but this would make me speculate that your mother may have understood you more than your father. Saturn's also retrograde in your chart, which can indicate an absent father. I find that that's not always true, but I do find it's true more than not, I guess I could say. So I don't know if that's useful at all, but there's some indicators in your chart which show, maybe an absent father or a father who didn't understand you, but maybe a more present mother. That's common with Cancer rising, but especially because Moon is at the top of your chart as well. Probably a very present mother in your life. One contradiction is that Sun can represent father, but so can Saturn. Saturn is in the 10th house, which would indicate a very present father, but it's actually, I think I know what it's saying. maybe I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but Moon is conjunct Saturn, so I almost think that maybe your mother was very fatherly, or your mother was, played like a traditionally fatherly role. I could be wrong. That could be one way of reading this. Like your mother may have been very authoritative or kind of stern, paternal in a way, had traditionally masculine qualities. Um, a different way of reading this could be your father may have been very present sometimes, but very absent other times, and not really understood you. Maybe both of those things are true. It's hard for me to say for sure. But those are kind of the different tidbits I can see about your childhood, your upbringing. Let's talk about some major challenges for you. So I've already covered a little bit about that, but let's see, where can I go with this here? First of all, I just want to say one really general thing. In your chart, you're balancing very different energies. Right off the bat, that's going to be one challenge for you. I think this is something that it doesn't look so intense that it's going to be crippling for your whole life. I think this is something that even by now you've probably already figured out to a large degree. Balancing the impulsive Aries moon, really intense feelings with Capricorn sun, wanting everything to be practical and long lasting. I think it'll just make growing up more difficult for you. So that could be definitely a large challenge, but something that I would speculate you'll likely have a pretty good hold on, by your 20s, even as we speak right now. Okay, but another challenge, we can look at the nodes. So we already talked about your south node in Aquarius, the child prodigy, very intelligent, ahead of your time. A lot of strengths there, I will say for sure. This may be subjective, but I almost think that's one of the stronger node placements to have, because you start out, kind of like a genius. You start out revolutionary. The challenge comes in with the north node. The north node shows an area that you haven't mastered yet. North node is in Leo, so it's saying that learn to be in the moment at times as well. You don't always have to think about the greater picture. It's all about balance. So it's great that you are naturally focused on the big picture, focused on facts and information. That's all great, but it's all meaningless if there's no passion in it. If there's no subjectivity at all and you have no passion or no feeling in it, then what's the point of the learning or the information? You know what I mean? I think that's what it's getting at. North Node in Leo says put some heart into it. Bring some heart, bring some feeling, bring some passion, and then balance that with the information, and then use that. So you can use the information maybe to, I don't know, whatever your purpose is. I don't even want to speculate on it, because Leo is very personal to you. It's what you feel. It's something that you bring. Your unique goals or ambitions, your unique desires. Focus on that more, develop that more, and then that will enrich the information that you are seeking, or the information that you're creating, or whatever it is that you're inventing. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. If any of this doesn't make sense at all, feel free to, please let me know, and I will either explain through email, or, sometimes I do follow-up videos as well to explain things further. But just let me know. An interesting thing too is that both North Node and Saturn are in fire signs, Leo and Aries. Both of these placements are very karmic, and they both show issues that we are learning, and they both show challenges in the life, especially early on. Excuse me. So let's talk about Saturn for a little bit, and then I'll talk about why I think it's interesting that both North Node and Saturn are in fire signs. So Saturn in Aries is particularly difficult. Wherever Saturn is in the chart is always difficult, especially early in life. But some Saturn placements are more difficult than others. So for you, Saturn is in Aries. The reason why this is difficult is because Saturn is in fall in Aries. This is maybe the most challenging Saturn placement to have. The way this usually goes is well, how do I put this? Aries has to do with, self-esteem, pride, individuality, self-expression. Yeah, mostly those things. I think that kind of puts it, in a nutshell. And Saturn makes you really work, for whatever area it's in. So typically, early in life, when you have Saturn in Aries, you and your peers, basically you and anyone born about 2 years before you all have displacement, and you're all very hard on yourselves for the most part. So what I find with people who have Saturn in Aries is that often as they grow up, they are often depressed, or they have other mental health issues. They're anxious. A lot of this is just because they're so hard on themselves. They have these huge expectations. This is strengthened for you by your sun in Capricorn too. You have huge expectations for yourself. And this is going to be especially difficult early in life because you feel like you're letting yourself down all the time. You have these high expectations that you don't meet for yourself. So that's the hard part. If Saturn challenges us and makes us work for things, having that huge challenge and that weight on our own self-expression and our own individuality, that's, what harder place could you have that kind of energy? So this is very difficult, especially early on. But with Saturn, it just takes time. And the more challenging it is, the more potentially rewarding it is later, because it forces you to become stronger and to, to work to earn the area that it's challenging. So because you don't initially have that strong ego or the strong sense of identity, the strong pride, the strong self-expression, because you don't have those things naturally and you have to work for them, it makes them that much stronger once you do create them within yourself. This usually takes decades. This will take time. You haven't yet reached your first Saturn return, which happens in your late 20s. In case you're not familiar, the Saturn return is what happens when transiting Saturn goes all the way back around and reaches the place it was when you were born. For all of us, this happens in our late 20s, age, let's say 28 to 30 or so. So usually this is an experience where you have increased responsibility and you make some kind of breakthrough. So for you specifically, this will have a lot to do with your self-expression, your individuality, your pride, all those things that we've talked about. All these things may be things that you've really struggled with, especially for the first part of your life, but it will get easier over time because you will get better at it. You will get stronger. And I say this knowing that, we all have free will. You don't have to get stronger at these things, but most people do. And speculating based on the placements in your chart, you look like someone that's interested in your own self-development. So I'm sure you've already made huge strides in this area and will continue to do so in the future. Okay. Oh yeah, and then the last part about that is, as you get better and better, we can become a master in this area, the area that Saturn's in. So, although you may really struggle with your own identity early in life, it's something that you get better at with over time, and eventually you can become an expert there because you know not only how to be strong in that area, but you also know what it's like not to be strong. You've made that whole progression all on your own. It's not something that's given to you. It's something that you've created yourself. You created this own self-expression, the independence, your own energy. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I always say Saturn in Aries is probably the most difficult Saturn placement to have, but it's also potentially the most rewarding in time. It just takes time. Especially getting to your 30s, 40s, 50s, you can be very much, a very strong leader for sure. I think that's very powerful for you because it's not just Saturn that points to that. You have many placements in your chart which show you're meant to be a leader. You're meant to do your own thing. You're meant to bring something very unique into this world. So Saturn in Aries might be a drag early in life, but it's part of a larger picture for you. It's part of something really powerful, a lot of potential there. Okay, now let's combine that with North Node in Leo. So both of these placements are showing that you are working through the challenge of again, being a leader, I know I keep saying that, but being a leader, not just through thought, not, because that comes to you naturally. It comes naturally for you to think independently and to observe in an independent way. That's easy for you, generally speaking. What's difficult for you is showing that to people, and, blazing your own path, not being afraid to speak out, not being afraid to be vocal and be different, be rebellious, be active, be. I'm kind of struggling with this. Like, instead of just observing or being a fly on the wall, be active, make the change. Does that make sense? Like, make the change, take the action, be the one changing things, be the one doing things, not just learning about things. Learning about things is awesome, don't get me wrong. That's a huge strength that you've always had, and that's going to continue to be an absolutely necessary part of the picture. But what you are working on, what will initially be a struggle, but eventually I would speculate you're going to be very good at this, is being that action taker, being the one that calls the shots and leads in a hands-on way. Does that make sense? I really hope that makes sense. Okay, but those are the main challenges for you. So yes, very difficult early on, but really potentially very rewarding later on in life. It's interesting too, you have Pluto and Sagittarius, so really all the fire signs have some intense karmic placements in them. Saturn, Pluto, North Node, all of these placements, the common thread is energies that may seem dark or challenging at first, but they're all pushing your evolution. So fire signs are a really important element for you astrologically. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, they all represent something you're working on, something you're evolving, an area of your evolution. The fire, the charisma, the spark, the action. And then again, that just fits so nicely because in your past lives, you've mastered observing, you've mastered learning, you're bringing that into this life. That's a continued area of expertise and skill for you. You know how to learn, you know how to observe, you know how to compile information. The exciting thing is once you learn to apply that in an active way, in a physical way, in a fiery way. So really cool stuff, really interesting chart. Okay. Let's see. One other challenge too is detriment placements in general. You have Mercury in Sagittarius, so that's in detriment. Saturn is in fall in Aries. Particularly though, Mars in detriment in Libra. I find that very interesting for someone who, speculating based on your placements, you're meant to be a leader, you're meant to blaze your own path, be an individual. It's very interesting that you have Mars in Libra. So Mars is our fighting style. It's how we initiate things. It's our drive. It's our passion to some extent. Our ambitions, our goals. For you, Mars is in Libra, so it's in detriment. This means that the way you approach these things is different. It's unusual. This also means that you may fight for the underdog. You may fight for something that is not mainstream, not conventional. It's not the consensus. So you may fight for, information that is not popular. Does that make sense? Or you may fight for like a counterculture, something like that. Although Mars and Libra may, at first glance, it seems difficult for a leader because you don't want to fight. You don't want to stand out. You'd rather just go with the flow. You'd rather make peace. You're a lover more than a fighter, so to speak. But this can also be excellent for being a leader because Mars and Libra means that the way you handle confrontation or critical situations is by thinking them through, analyzing. So this means that you're not one to panic. This means that you're excellent when it comes to long-term strategy, really thinking things through. You have excellent foresight. Okay, so um, so initially you may struggle with how do I put this? Like you may actually be a little bit of a pushover early in life. You may struggle with having boundaries, um, and defending yourself. But this is something that can be developed, and I'm sure you probably have developed already. You have these other energies in your chart which show that you know the boundaries, you know what's right, you have this kind of stubborn side. So I would speculate that this fighting style it's just something that you will learn over time. And again, there are strengths that come with this placement: the foresight, the planning, the fighting for the underdog. Once you combine that with these astrologically fiery energies that you're developing, or in other words, how do I put this? Okay, so you fight for the underdog, you think critical situations through. Once you combine that with a new learned ability to stand out from the crowd and take action, that's where I'm picturing this like explosion, like that's where you'll be able to. I'm almost picturing you leading a rebellious army, and I don't think that's meant to be taken literally. I almost think you're meant to be fighting for some kind of information. And I feel like you already know what I'm talking about. I feel like you've already discovered something that you're passionate about, you're learning more about, and you want to fight for it. Fight for the truth, fight for something else. It may be something that I'm not aware of, I'm not sure. But you're gonna do it in your own way. That's something that pops up in your chart over and over and over again. You're doing this your own way. Like, it's not something that you're learning from anybody else. Okay, that's really interesting. So you're taking information, you're learning about the world, discovering something that you want to fight for, something that is against the status quo, against tradition, against the mainstream. And you're going to learn to stand out from the crowd, take action, be a leader, and fight for it in a unique way, in a way that no one's thought of before, nobody's done this before. This may sound super vague, but I feel like I'm onto something here. So, and hopefully that makes sense. Okay. A lot of challenging, but I would say also inspiring stuff going on in that part of the reading. Next, let's talk about your career. I'm gonna write down that timestamp real quick. Okay, so for your career, we've already talked, pretty much for the career part, I just talk about your strengths and what you need. Also, we'll look at the midheaven and the top of your chart and see what your kind of relationship with public and profession looks like. And then we'll combine that with your strengths and then kind of speculate on what career would be good for you. I know this is something that you were particularly interested in. Okay, so a huge thing is being a leader. I think that's, that has some pretty obvious implications when you combine that with, the professional sphere. I do think it's very interesting, though. Sun in Capricorn, Mars in Libra, even midheaven in Pisces. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But I'm seeing multiple indicators in your chart that show that you're actually comfortable not always being in a leadership position. I think you may be more of a leader later in life. I'm not exactly sure, but I almost am kind of speculating that you may start out in a more lowly position. You may be comfortable with that. That may be part of the process for you. Aries moon does show kind of a stubborn or rebellious streak, but then there's these other placements, again, Mars in Libra, Sun in Capricorn, midheaven in Pisces. All these show that you're willing to kind of bide your time, so to speak. And, maybe you need time to gather information or become stronger develop yourself, or to have more experiences in the meantime before coming out into the open and saying, I'm doing my own thing now. So anyway, I just want to put that out there. But you do have, on the other hand, there's major placements that show doing your own thing. You have some placements that are common with business owners, like Sun in Capricorn, Moon in Aries, Saturn and Moon in the 10th house. All these show, blazing your own path, running your own operation, being a business owner, a manager, doing something that allows you a lot of autonomy. Maybe not at first. Maybe this is something that you'll work up to. Okay, let's get a little bit more specific, though, if we can. You have midheaven in Pisces. Midheaven represents our, who we are in public, who we are online in public, at work, etc. For you, midheaven is in Pisces, so to be honest, that doesn't help me a lot because this means that you can slip into any kind of situation in public. You can be this, you can be that. I think Lady Gaga has midheaven in Pisces, for example. So, you can put on many different outfits, so to speak. What else? You can camouflage yourself in public. I almost think this is part of what you're meant to do, though. You're meant to be someone who kind of starts out learning, starts out very modest, starts out in a lowly position, but you're constantly learning and developing and just soaking up the information, mentally, but also emotionally too. And then, it's all building up to, this future leadership position, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm just going totally crazy here, but hopefully I'm making any kind of sense at all. Okay, but Jupiter's right there by the midheaven, so that does indicate working with higher information, working, at a university or a church, wherever you go for philosophy and understanding the world and the cosmos. There's a lot of energy there, so that could be definitely something big. Maybe being like a professor, or historically we would say this would be, you're meant to be in the clergy or something like that. Someone who, investigates higher knowledge and understanding of the cosmos and passes that knowledge on, that wisdom onto others. So that's a huge huge potential there for sure. What else can we talk about? The other ones are just Saturn and Moon in 10th house. Those I would think would be more along the lines of business owner. The ruler of your midheaven is, again, Jupiter in the 9th house in Pisces. So it all points back to higher learning, knowledge, spirituality, wisdom. So I think that's going to be difficult for you, honestly, because it's not going to be easy, especially the way things are now. The way things are now in regard to, the way society views philosophy and higher learning. It's kind of a mess right now. I think you're aware of that. So I think it will be initially difficult to know how do you, as a truth seeker, how do you put yourself in a position of delving into spirituality and maybe being a leader in that area, teaching others. You could do something like what I'm doing, leading online, leading through YouTube or somewhere else. Because you have so many of these karmic placements in the fire signs that we talked about, though, those to me indicate something more physical in nature, though. So I almost would speculate that you're meant to do something in a more physical way. I'm not sure exactly how that would work. What else can we talk about here? I think those are the main themes that I'm seeing for career. Usually there's more diversity there, but okay, so To look at it from a more mundane lens, you definitely, I would speculate you're very intelligent. So maybe something more academic. I don't know if you have a degree, but that will be difficult though, because I think being a truth seeker, you may not always agree with the mainstream narrative that's taught. So that's kind of the catch 22, I think. And I know I'm really going out on a limb here. I don't know you at all. I'm just speculating based on your placements, but that's the picture I see from your chart. You're someone who wants to learn and, pass on that learning, but that's why it has to be done in your own way, because you want the truth. You're looking at things from a very unique lens, one that may not be accepted publicly or institutionally. So I don't know whether, I can't say whether you should do that from inside the system and then do it your own way, or completely do it from kind of outside the system like I am. But it becomes even more interesting because I do think it's something that you're going to do physically, like in the real world, not so much online, I don't think. Online could definitely be part of it, but your 11th house is empty. And you have a lot of placements in fire and earth signs, which have, they're more physical in nature. So I wish I could help more, but that's mostly what I see. I see you starting out in a more lowly position, whatever that means. It could be really many different things. From a more mundane perspective, I think you would be good at a lot of different jobs. I don't know if you'd be necessarily deeply fulfilled in many different positions, but, you have the intelligence, you have the independence. But that too can make things challenging, because although you may initially be satisfied working in a kind of lowly position, you want to know that it's going somewhere. Your placement suggests that you're very goal oriented. You're thinking about the future. So, you want a plan, you want a goal, you want to be working up to something. So, so you can work a lowly position as long as you know it's going somewhere. But where do you want to go? That's the hard part. I think I gave you all I can give you. Something on your own, something having to do with higher knowledge, information, spirituality, metaphysics, and spreading that information directly with people. Maybe speaking in front of people, that could be something really interesting. Being some kind of like professor. May not literally be a professor, but someone who takes on a role like that. That could be you. I know that was a little rambly, but I think that's as far as I can get. That's as deep as I can get there. As for money, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Oh, okay. Well, I was looking, your second house cusp is Leo. The ruler of that is the sun. Sun is in 7th house Capricorn, pretty close to the descendant. So that may be a part of this as well. Sun in 7th house means that you're very empathetic. You actually, we'll talk more about that in the romantic part of the relationship, but romantic part of the reading. But you're so empathetic that you may almost not feel yourself unless you're working with someone else. So what I'm getting at is you may really thrive with working one-on-one with people. Working one-on-one with clients, that could be part of this. That could be, because your second house cusp, which has to do with money, how you make money, because that's ruled by Sun conjunct the descendant, that means that you may make a lot of money working with people directly, one-on-one with others. And I think that fits in pretty nicely with your other placements in your chart, showing that you're meant to work physically with people. Like you've already had the past lives helping people indirectly from some like laboratory somewhere or some basement. This life, you're meant to be working hands-on with people, face-to-face, intimately, teaching them, showing them, helping them some kind of way, showing them, teaching, talking about philosophy, metaphysics, higher learning, one-on-one. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if that helps at all, but I hope it does. Excuse me. Okay. Next, let's talk about the kind of romantic sphere for you. So mostly for this, I look to Venus, Mars, and the descendant. Venus is in Capricorn, Mars is in Libra. Let's talk about Mars first, because I think it actually has a little bit less to do with this. So Mars, we already talked about Mars to some extent, but Mars also has to do with our sexuality, sex drive, what we're sexually attracted to. For you, Mars is in Libra, which suggests you may actually have a kind of low sex drive. And you may have sexual chemistry with people who have Libra placements, or people who come across like Libra. So people who are very empathetic and easygoing, intellectual, very intelligent, academic, very observant. That is sexy to you. That's attractive. So again, this could literally be people with strong Libra placements, Sun, Moon, Rising, Venus, Mars in Libra. Or someone who just is like Libra. So it could also be other air placements too, Gemini or Aquarius, maybe similar enough to have, to spark this sexual chemistry, sexual attraction, etc. Venus, though, I think is actually more important for romantic compatibility. So Venus is in 7th house Capricorn. This means that for you, like, your fantasy, your, idea of romance is all about the long run. So, like, your idea of romance would be like growing old with someone. That's what you want. That's what you desire. That's romantic to you. That's like you don't even really have romantic feelings for someone without thinking about the long run. You want someone that you can really invest in. This is a very monogamous placement, very focused, very loyal, very dedicated, and very practical as well. You want someone practical. So Venus in Capricorn, it means that you're attracted to people with Capricorn placements. This works out pretty well because you have Sun in Capricorn. So anyone who has strong Capricorn placements, you'll not only relate to a lot, but you'll also be attracted to them. So it's going to work generally pretty easily. Of course, we have to talk about, what else is going on in their chart besides the Capricorn placements. But generally speaking, though, people who have a lot of Capricorn energy, it's going to be easy and attractive for you, and pleasurable as well. People who are, practical, down to earth, goal oriented, they think about the long term. They are modest, humble, hardworking, kind of salt of the earth, so to speak. That's going to be attractive. You're going to relate to that. So that's a huge area of compatibility. And you have your descendant there too, which we haven't even talked about yet, but definitely big compatibility with Capricorn. Could be other earth signs too, though. Virgo and Taurus are also going to be practical, hardworking, down to earth. So they're similar enough. They may also be attractive for you, and you're going to relate with them too. So compatibility wise, earth signs is probably the biggest one by far that I can see. What I look at for long-term compatibility, even more than Venus or Mars, is the descendant. So you have ascendant in Cancer, so that's more like what you represent in a relationship. Descendant is in Capricorn, so that more represents the other person, your partner. And so basically, this means that you work best with other Capricorn people. And this has to do with any kind of partnership. It doesn't have to be romantic. And, it could be like a business partnership or a friendship. Any kind of one-on-one dynamic, you're going to naturally work best with people with a lot of Capricorn energy. And again, this could literally be with someone with strong Capricorn placements, or someone just who has themes reminiscent of Capricorn. So again, hardworking, practical, goal-oriented. That's the kind of person you'd like to work with. What's common, when you have Cancer rising with Capricorn descendant, it's common to be attracted to people that are older than you or more experienced than you in some way. Typically, because you'd have Cancer rising, you would be the more, emotional one. I guess you could still be. You have that side of you as well. You may be the more emotional or more impulsive one in the relationship. You may be attracted to someone who's more put together, someone who's, like the rock, someone who's always stabilizing everything, very even kilter, so to speak. I forget the term. Someone who has their shit together, basically. Someone who is mature. That's gonna be probably the biggest thing for you. And this is all part of, ensuring that you're with someone that you can invest in. For you don't want the flings, you don't want the, just wild experiences. You really want to nestle in with someone and dive deep with someone. So Capricorn is gonna be your best bet. um Having Sun, Descendant, and Venus all in Capricorn, that makes me look at that sign more than any other one easily for your long-term compatibility. You're going to relate to them, you're going to work, nicely. It's almost like it's kind of an opposites attract dynamic, but at the same time you also relate to them a lot too, since you are a Capricorn also. So by far, that's easily what I would look to, someone with strong Capricorn energy. But they may need to have some other stuff going on in their chart as well, because if they just have a bunch, if they, like, obviously this wouldn't happen, but theoretically, if they had every planet in Capricorn, I think it would work, but they may clash with you at times because of your moon in Aries. So it may work better if they do have some kind of Libra placements, because then they would have that sexual chemistry with you that we talked about. But also, Libra energy loves Aries energy. In other words, you have Aries moon, so you can be forthright, you can be very spontaneous, impulsive, very confident. You feel so strongly in the moment that it's very captivating, it's very powerful. Someone who has Libra placements will be very receptive to that. They will just soak that up, and they will love to follow you, follow your drive, follow your confidence. They're easygoing and flexible, so they love to go along with someone confident and independent like you are. So I would say Capricorn's definitely the biggest thing, but if we added some Libra energy or maybe other air energy, I really look to Libra more than Gemini or Aquarius, though. That's what I would bet on. Hopefully you know enough astrological jargon that this isn't overwhelming, but if I had to just list off signs, I'd say Capricorn's the biggest one to look for, and then maybe with some Libra placements as well. That would be, chef's kiss. But let's run through the other elements real quick. So huge compatibility with any of the earth signs for sure. Virgo maybe a little bit less so, because Virgo's not always compatible with Aries as much. Those signs can kind of, same with Taurus and Aries. I think Capricorn works a lot better than Virgo or Taurus, but it just kind of depends. Virgo and Taurus could work. Earth energy in general is definitely something to look at. Air signs we talked about. Libra I really look to more than Aquarius or Gemini. Gemini is so scattered and you are so focused. So I think that could be an area of contention. Like Gemini is over here and they're over there. They're kind of like a little kid, looking over here, looking over there. So that may not be attractive for either of you. You just may be too different. You are so focused, and so you can be kind of intense. You can be, I don't know. You have like tunnel vision. Like you focus on what you want and you go after it. Gemini is not like that at all. It's just kind of wandering all over the place. It's directionless. It has no structure. Aquarius, I think would be more interesting than Gemini, but less interesting than Libra as far as air signs go. You do have your South Node in Aquarius, so you may have some kind of like intense history or karma with people who have Aquarius placements. But Aquarius it doesn't really fit with your Aries or Capricorn placements. So I'm more looking at Libra as far as the air signs go. In general, air signs, they can be directionless and flaky, and that I think it just really doesn't fit with what you're looking for. But again, I keep going back to, someone with a lot of Capricorn energy and then a little bit of Libra energy. I think that would work really well. Okay, let's talk about the other two elements. Water signs, you really don't have a lot of water energy. You do have Cancer rising, you've got Jupiter in midheaven and Pisces, but neither of those placements really have anything to do with romantic compatibility, in my opinion. And Cancer rising, so here's how this works. So typically, when you meet someone who has placements in the sign of your rising, it's usually more of a friend dynamic. I don't usually view it as romantic because it's kind of like a magnet. If you are Cancer rising, it's like you're let's just say you're a positive magnet. If you meet someone else who has Cancer placements or other water placements, it's like you're meeting another positive magnet. So you do have a lot in common. It can be really easy to relate to each other, but there's no magnetic pull. It's not attractive. There's no friction there. It's not complementary, so you're not really like benefiting each other than relating to each other. That can be helpful, but you're not contributing something different to one another. You're not contributing something that the other one doesn't have. You both are just delving into emotion, and I think that can be mostly just useful in understanding yourself or working with someone that's similar to yourself. Sometimes we need that. But when it comes to evolving and taking the next step, I don't think that's really something that's attractive. It's not something that is... It doesn't usually indicate sexual compatibility, I think. So what am I getting at here? Cancer placements would boost the chance for friendship with you. That's what I think. Scorpio, sure. I mean, Scorpio is could go either way, because on the one hand, they do have some things in common with you. Scorpio is a little bit similar to Capricorn and Aries, because Scorpio is also very driven. It blazes its own path. It's a little bit stubborn. It's a little bit rebellious. It dives into countercultures. So on paper, it looks like Scorpio has a lot in common with you. But I think, in actuality and in physicality, Scorpio is very emotionally intense. I guess you could be too, but it's in a different way for you. I don't know. I don't know what to do with Scorpio for you. I think it's definitely not one that stands out to me. I think it kind of could go either way depending on what else is going on in their chart. Pisces, they may help your career. You may meet people who have Pisces energy in public or in your career because it's such a career-focused area for you. But other than that, Pisces is also directionless, kind of like Gemini. Again, you're so focused, so I don't see why you would be attracted to one another. I don't see how being less structured would be beneficial to you, and I don't see how being more structured would be beneficial to Pisces, really. I don't see that being interesting or beneficial for you, really. So if anything, as far as the water signs go, I think Cancer might be interesting, especially for friendships. Or Cancer could be part of a romantic dynamic, but they would have to have some Capricorn or maybe Libra in their chart as well. Couldn't be just Cancer on its own, I don't think. Okay, hopefully this isn't too rambly. One last thing about that too, we tend to date people more similar to ourselves early in life because we're still figuring out who we are. So I wouldn't be surprised if you've been with a Cancer person maybe in your teen years or something like that. But I would be surprised if you were with someone who had a lot of Cancer energy later in life. I would think that they would have something else going on, especially Capricorn. I keep going back to that. Okay, lastly is the fire element. So this is kind of interesting. You do have Moon in Aries, so you are very fiery. You have a lot of that energy. You're going to relate very deeply. Whenever we meet someone who has a similar energy to where our Moon is, we relate very deeply. We can connect on a very deep level. So people who have Aries placements, you can have a very deep connection with. Could be romantic, could be more of a friendship. Either way, deep connection for sure. I do think this could be kind of interesting because, how do I put this? Definitely deep connection potential. And then Aries is a cardinal sign. We talked at the very beginning of your reading about how you have so much in the cardinal signs. And whenever you combine multiple cardinal signs or multiple signs of the same mode, um, like again, Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, they're all very different. They may butt heads, they may disagree, but they're kind of playing the game by the same rules, so to speak. They're all initiating something, they're just initiating different things. So, someone with strong Aries energy, they're going to be a leader, they're going to be initiating something, they're going to be blazing their own path. You have all those things in common to them. The difference is they're going to be bringing something different to the table, they're going to be doing something in their own way. So although you may butt heads, you understand each other, and that's where it could be a very lucrative relationship. I do find that I do tend to see a lot of Aries couples because I'm not sure why exactly. Maybe it takes another Aries to keep up with an Aries. I don't know, but Aries could definitely be interesting. I would maybe even put it third after Capricorn and Libra. As for Leo and Sagittarius, I think those are much less interesting to me, for your romantic potential. Sagittarius, you may relate to a lot and have a lot of great conversations with because you have Mercury in Sagittarius. You communicate like a fire sign, you think like a fire sign, like a Sagittarius in particular. So that could definitely be, really interesting, great conversations. You could learn a lot from other, people who have Sagittarius placements. But it definitely doesn't stand out to me for, big romantic potential. And Leo, your North Node's in Leo. So people who have a lot of Leo energy, you may learn from a lot. They may help to show you something, teach you something. Even if you're just, I don't know, learning something from them indirectly. But I don't usually recommend that type of dynamic romantically because learning something from someone can be useful, but it's not always fun. It's not always sexy. You know what I mean? It can be very difficult to be constantly learning things, being constantly challenged by your lover or your relationship. That can be a difficult area to have that kind of challenge in, I think, unless it's part of some kind of other dynamic. But the way it falls in your chart, I don't see that being interesting. I see Leo being more as like a mentor or you learning from Leo people. I don't see that being a romantic connection. So in short, Capricorn jumps out to me by far the most. I guess really any of the cardinal signs, but Capricorn by far the most. Capricorn, Libra I'd rank second, then maybe Aries or Cancer, but I would think someone with a lot of Capricorn and a little bit of Libra would be perfect for you. But I don't know. That's just me. You can let me know what you think or what your experiences are if you want to. Okay. But what else can I say? At this point, I like to just look at the chart and make sure I haven't missed over anything or anything I haven't gotten a chance to talk about. I bring up at this point. This is one of my longer readings. I think I've covered everything I want to. Yeah. So really interesting stuff. I think you have something really special here. And I don't know what it is, but I think you're meant to contribute to this world in a very unique, special way. You're meant to do something very unique and special. I know that may sound a little bit cliche, but I think it's true. Yeah, really interesting stuff. So definitely let me know if you have any questions at all. I know this was a little bit rambly, and again, I apologize that my voice is not fully effective for you, but I hope that I was clear enough. And again, let me know if I need to rephrase or clarify anything at all. I'd be more than happy to do so. Okay, but thanks for this opportunity to read your chart, and have a spectacular day.